secret broke, and suddenly the weight of silence was gone. For so long they believed concealment was protection, that as long as shadows kept the truth hidden, they had control over the story. But the moment light touched it, the illusion fractured. The truth doesn't need to scream, it simply stands, and in its stillness, it destroys every mask built around it. They expected you to crumble when the secret slipped. Instead, you stood taller, as if revelation was the very weapon you were waiting for. And in that moment, they realized something darker. What guards you is not fragile defense, but a presence that cannot be touched. Their terror did not come from the secret itself. It came from the fact that you carried it with composure, as if you had already prepared for its release. Fear spreads fastest when people see strength where they expected collapse. They wanted whispers to break you, but your unshaken posture told a different story. You didn't scramble to explain. You didn't beg for understanding. You didn't waste your energy trying to rewrite what was already written. You allowed the truth to breathe, and that allowance unsettled them. The psychology of exposure is cruel. Most fall apart when their image is threatened because they were living for approval. You were not. You had already detached yourself from the need to be seen as flawless. That detachment became your armor. They thought they could wound you with revelation, but revelation only stripped away illusions, leaving you sharper, clearer, and far more dangerous than before. Guardianship in your life was never about crowds of people defending you. What guards you is the strength of your own mind, the discipline you forged in silence, the resilience built from scars you refused to let define you. That is what terrified them. They realized you are not defended by fragile alliances, but by an inner fortress. People are unnerved when they see someone who cannot be blackmailed by truth, who cannot be shaken by exposure. It means every tactic they rely on, fear, shame, gossip, has no effect. They brought their arsenal, and you stood untouched. That immunity frightens them more than anything. Because once someone cannot be destroyed by secrets, they cannot be destroyed at all. In relationships, secrets are often used as currency. They believed yours was a debt they could hold over you, a chain they could rattle whenever they wanted control. But you refused to pay. You showed them that secrets only matter when you agree to carry shame. You carried none. You accepted the truth for what it was, and in doing so, you robbed them of their power. They were left holding broken chains, realizing they had invested their control in something you had already outgrown. That reversal is what made them tremble. Their greatest weapon became meaningless, and their greatest illusion dissolved in front of them. You won by refusing to let the past write your future. Friends and foes alike now look at you differently. They whisper less because they realize whispering no longer hurts you. They attack less because they realize attacks cannot reach you. Their fear grows not because the secret was revealed, but because your response redefined the terms of power. Authority shifted when you refused to collapse. They thought exposure would make you weaker in the eyes of others, but instead it showed people how unshakable you are. The world respects resilience more than perfection. By standing tall, you revealed a strength that even allies didn't know you carried. And in that revelation, you became untouchable in a way reputation alone could never grant. The psychology behind their terror is simple. Manipulation relies on leverage. If they can hold something above you, they can bend your will. But when the leverage breaks, the manipulator is exposed as powerless. You dismantled their leverage without needing to fight. You let the truth out, you let it breathe, and instead of suffocating, you thrived. That reversal forces them into silence, because they no longer know how to approach you. Their strategies fail against someone who cannot be controlled. It is not that the secret was small. It is that your strength was greater. And when strength overshadows scandal, those who guard you are no longer people, but the unshakable walls of your own clarity. They imagined you would be isolated when the truth came out. But instead, you became more magnetic. People began to respect the way you carried yourself in the storm. They saw dignity in your restraint, authority in your composure, and courage in your acceptance. That magnetism is what terrifies your enemies now. They realize you are no longer vulnerable to opinion. Opinion may shift, but strength remains, and strength is what people ultimately follow. They set the stage for your collapse, and instead gave you a platform. That outcome is the cruelest kind of revenge. Their attempt to destroy you became the reason others saw your true power. What guards you is not luck or coincidence. It is preparation. You spent years learning not to be ruled by fear, years teaching yourself that identity built on external approval is fragile. You built your foundation differently. That preparation meant that when the secret broke, you didn't stumble. You absorbed the blow and turned it into fuel. They thought revelation would strip you. Instead, it refined you. They mistook survival for fragility, forgetting that scars do not make you weaker. They make you untouchable. Their terror grew because they understood too late that exposure does not end you. Exposure forges you. In love, this lesson is invaluable. Many remain chained to partners who use secrets, flaws, or vulnerabilities as weapons. You chose another path. You faced your truth head-on, and by doing so, you stripped partners of their ability to manipulate. Love built on fear is not love. Love built on clarity cannot be broken. Your willingness to accept yourself fully means no one can ever threaten you with your own truth again. That realization is terrifying for those who depend on control. They cannot dominate someone who has already embraced their shadow. You carried that shadow into light, and in light, you became impossible to own. When loyalty is invisible, it looks like magic to those who seek control. People who manipulate rely on visible chains. They want to see your dependence, your constant need for reassurance, your visible displays of loyalty so they can measure their power over you. But your loyalty doesn't scream. It lives quietly in action, in presence, in consistency. That silence unsettles them because they cannot track it. They can't measure something that doesn't need to perform. Your loyalty doesn't beg to be recognized, and that absence confuses those addicted to control. To them, invisibility looks like rebellion. They mistake calm dedication for secrecy because their mind cannot understand a love or loyalty that isn't chained to performance. The dangerous part about invisible loyalty is that it cannot be manipulated. They can withhold affection, they can play games with attention, they can attempt to guilt you into proving your commitment. But none of it works when your loyalty is not tied to reaction. You don't need to prove what you already know. You don't need to shout what you live daily. And because you are not dependent on their approval, their control mechanisms fall flat. The psychology is simple. Manipulators rely on visible signals. Without them, they panic because they cannot control what they cannot see. You trained yourself to hold your loyalty in silence, and that silence itself became the threat. True loyalty isn't about display, it's about endurance. You can stand beside someone without needing constant validation for it. You can care without posting it for the world to see. That is strength. The desperate think loyalty is a chain around your neck, visible to everyone, proof that they own you. But you don't allow yourself to be owned. You choose where you stand, and you stand quietly, because you know true loyalty does not need applause. That choice makes you dangerous to those who live by control, because they cannot bind you with demands. They cannot dictate your loyalty when it already belongs to your values, not their manipulations. In relationships, invisible loyalty separates love from possession. A partner who needs constant declarations, who tests you repeatedly, does not want love. They want evidence of control. They measure your worth by how many times you bend, how loudly you perform, how easily you can be guilted into proving yourself. But you operate differently. Your loyalty is lived in actions, not displayed for inspection. You don't fold to childish tests because you know the truth. Real loyalty is not loud, it is consistent. And because you refuse to perform, they panic. They see your silence as distance, when in reality it is strength. It terrifies them because they cannot pull your strings the way they imagined. Friendships are no exception. Some people cling to you only if your loyalty is visible. Constant texting, constant agreement, constant demonstration of allegiance. But invisible loyalty doesn't need such rituals. You can disappear into your own growth, your own battles, and still return unwavering. That confuses those who live on drama. They need conflict to feel connected. They need visible chains to feel secure. But you are anchored differently. Your loyalty doesn't dissolve when you are silent. It grows deeper in solitude, and that unsettles them because they cannot control what they cannot monitor. To them, loyalty without performance is unexplainable, almost magical. At work, invisible loyalty shows up in how you stay committed to your path, not to office politics. While others scramble to prove loyalty to bosses or teams with words and performance, you let results speak. Your consistency is quiet, but it outlasts noise. Leaders who seek control don't understand it. They want gestures, grand affirmations, visible compliance. Your calm focus on delivery terrifies them because it cannot be manipulated by shallow gestures. Invisible loyalty looks like independence, and independence unsettles systems that rely on obedience. You prove that loyalty to principles always outlives loyalty to personalities. That distinction makes you formidable. Psychology explains the depth of this. Human beings who crave control seek certainty. They want visible signs so they can predict your next move. When your loyalty is invisible, you deny them that certainty. They don't know if silence means devotion or detachment. They don't know if absence means loyalty or distance. That unpredictability forces them to question themselves, and in questioning themselves, their power weakens. Invisible loyalty puts the focus back on your character, not on their demands. That reversal is what makes you untouchable. They cannot define your loyalty when it lives outside of their control. Invisible loyalty also saves you from being drained. Visible loyalty is often transactional. Prove yourself endlessly, sacrifice constantly, display submission in ways that diminish you. Invisible loyalty demands none of that. You stand where you choose, you commit where you believe, and you do it quietly. This prevents you from being manipulated through guilt or fear. You cannot be baited into endless cycles of proving yourself because you have nothing to prove. That composure saves your energy for what matters. The desperate see it as arrogance. In truth, it is discipline, and discipline always terrifies those who feed on control. The cruelest irony is that invisible loyalty is often the strongest kind. It doesn't shift with opinion. It doesn't vanish under pressure. It doesn't beg to be noticed. It simply remains. Yet because it is unseen, it looks magical to those who cannot comprehend it. They want ownership, but you offer freedom. They want control, but you offer choice. They cannot grasp it, and so they fear it. Because deep down, they know that invisible loyalty is loyalty that cannot be stolen, cannot be forced, cannot be manipulated. It belongs only to those strong enough to give it without chains. When power hides in plain sight, paranoia becomes its sharpest weapon. They expect power to announce itself with noise, with grand titles, with heavy crowns. But true power doesn't need spectacle. True power sits quietly in a room, unbothered, unreadable, untouchable, and in its silence, it creates chaos in the minds of those desperate to measure it. They begin whispering to themselves, wondering what you're planning, imagining moves you never even considered, exhausting themselves with predictions while you remain still. That is the brilliance of hidden power. It lets their paranoia do the work for you. You don't need to lift a hand when their own imagination is already dismantling their certainty. You've seen this play out in relationships. A manipulative partner thrives when they can read every expression, predict every reaction, and anticipate every weakness. But when you stop showing your cards, when you let your power sit quietly in your calm, they unraveled. They began projecting fears, overthinking your silence, and convincing themselves that you were steps ahead. Their paranoia became a mirror of their own fragility. They feared betrayal not because you betrayed them, but because they could no longer see through you. Hidden power forces them to live in suspicion, and suspicion eats them alive far faster than any confrontation could. In friendships, the same principle applies. Some people cling to influence through control, dominating conversations, setting agendas, making sure they remain the center of attention. But your power doesn't chase attention. You don't fight to be seen because you know presence cannot be faked. That unsettled them more than any open challenge. They began questioning your quiet confidence, inventing motives where there were none, and fearing that you might know more than you revealed. The paranoia didn't come from what you did. It came from their inability to measure what you held back. Hidden power turns the insecure into prisoners of their own imagination. Workplace politics are a perfect battlefield for this dynamic. The loudest often mistake themselves for the strongest. They flaunt their achievements, exaggerate their influence, and perform for recognition. But the one who works quietly, who delivers consistently, who doesn't reveal every strategy, that is the one who terrifies them. They don't know when or how you will move, only that your results speak louder than their tricks. Their paranoia grows in the silence between your words, in the stillness of your composure, in the fact that you don't need to remind anyone of your worth. They fight shadows while you build structures. And when the outcome arrives, their collapse feels inevitable, because hidden power doesn't race, it endures. Psychology explains why paranoia sharpens in the presence of unseen power. The human mind despises uncertainty. It fills silence with stories, and those stories are often darker than reality. When they cannot predict you, they create monsters in their imagination. They think you are plotting, planning, scheming against them, when in truth, you are simply grounded in your own clarity. But their paranoia becomes your unspoken ally. Every lie they tell themselves adds to their collapse. They fear moves you haven't even made, and in that fear, they reveal their weakness. That is why you win before the game even begins. You learned long ago that announcing every plan dilutes its strength. The desperate expose their cards too quickly, hoping to scare, hoping to impress, hoping to intimidate. But intimidation that announces itself is fragile. Once you look closely, it crumbles. Your kind of intimidation doesn't need words. It lives in the fact that you are unrateable. You could be planning nothing, yet they assume you are planning everything. You could be still, yet they assume you are in motion. The paranoia they create for themselves becomes the very storm that drowns them. Power is sharper when it lives in their mind, not your hands. In love, hidden power redefines intimacy. The one who does not cling, the one who does not beg, the one who does not chase holds the authority. You showed them that love rooted in desperation is fragile. You stayed grounded in your independence, and that unsettled them. They wanted to measure your need for them, but your silence gave them nothing. That silence became presence, and presence became threat. They grew paranoid not because you betrayed them, but because you proved you didn't need them to survive. When power hides in plain sight in love, it doesn't destroy, it exposes. It shows who is there for connection and who is there for control. The cruelest part about hidden power is that it doesn't need to strike often. When you do act, it carries the weight of silence behind it. They replay it, analyze it, exaggerate it because they fear what else you might be capable of. The paranoia continues long after the moment has passed. That paranoia spreads to others because fear is contagious. Suddenly, your name carries weight, not from what you did, but from what they think you might do. You allowed them to build your reputation for you, brick by brick, out of their own suspicion. That is power in its purest form. Power that doesn't require your effort, only their fear. Hidden power is not just a tactic, it is protection. It shields you from exploitation because you reveal little. It guards your peace because you refuse to let others dictate your narrative. It strengthens your presence because people sense depth they cannot measure. You don't play by their rules because you don't need to. They live for reaction. You live for clarity, and clarity doesn't perform, it simply exists. That existence terrifies them because they can't touch it. The louder they get, the more obvious their fragility. The quieter you become, the heavier your presence grows. They weren't shocked by the secret. They were horrified by how much stronger you became after it broke. Secrets are supposed to be weapons. They are supposed to weaken, to trap, to silence. The entire design of holding something over you depends on your fear of exposure. But when the silence was shattered, when the whispers became loud, you didn't fall. You didn't scramble or defend or beg for forgiveness. You stood taller. That reversal unsettled them in ways they could not admit. The secret wasn't their horror. Your resilience was. They expected destruction, and instead witnessed transformation. That kind of strength strips control from those who depend on shadows. Your power came from owning the story instead of running from it. The moment you accepted the truth without shame, you robbed them of their grip. They thought the revelation would leave you broken, but you turned it into evidence of endurance. Every scar became proof you could withstand fire. Every flaw became a testament to your humanity. Instead of weakening your presence, The truth magnified it. People fear most not when lies are revealed, but when someone survives them untouched. That survival changes perception. You became untouchable because you demonstrated something rare, the ability to live without masks. The horrified faces weren't about what was revealed. They were about what couldn't be destroyed. They realized the leverage they thought they had over you was an illusion. That recognition terrifies manipulators. They only hold power when you play by their rules. You refused. You carried yourself with composure, showing them that their loudest weapon was useless against you. And when a weapon fails, fear takes its place. They feared you because you proved that control only works on those who surrender to it. You never surrendered, and that defiance became a kind of legend. In relationships, this dynamic is sharper. A partner may try to use your vulnerability, your past, or your mistakes as tools of control. They assume you'll bend under the weight of being exposed. But you didn't. You allowed the truth to breathe, and instead of suffocating, you thrived. That horrified them because it stripped away the last card they had to play. You didn't collapse when they expected you to crawl. Instead, you rose, and in rising, you shattered their illusion of dominance. Love that survives exposure becomes something different, something free from control. That freedom unsettles those who live by manipulation, because they cannot control someone who refuses to be ashamed. Friendships show the same cruelty. Those who pretend loyalty, while holding secrets over you, are only waiting for a chance to use them. They wanted to see you small, embarrassed, diminished in the eyes of others. Yet when the truth came out, you didn't shrink. You grew. You didn't defend yourself. You let your life be the defense. And that defense was stronger than any words you could have offered. They were horrified not by the story, but by the way you owned it. When truth becomes your ally, their games become meaningless. You left them powerless because exposure didn't end you. It elevated you. The psychology behind their horror is simple. People equate secrets with shame. They assume the moment something hidden is revealed, the person collapses under social judgment. But when you train yourself to detach from opinion, you defy that expectation. You show that shame only works when you allow it. By refusing to carry shame, you made exposure powerless. That terrifies those who rely on guilt to control others. They saw you stronger after the truth, and that forced them to confront their own fragility. Because if you can rise from revelation, what excuse do they have for their collapse? Your growth after the secret broke was the cruelest kind of revenge. They thought they had orchestrated your downfall, but their scheme gave you visibility instead. People noticed how you responded, and your response commanded respect. It wasn't the secret that shaped perception. It was your composure. That composure became your crown. They wanted to bury you under whispers. Instead, the whispers turned into echoes of your strength. That transformation is what horrified them. You proved that their attempt to destroy you became the very reason you grew untouchable. At work, the same principle plays out. Colleagues may hope exposure of a weakness, a mistake, or a misstep will ruin your credibility. But credibility is not built on perfection. It is built on consistency. When the secret broke, you didn't deny or excuse. You continued to deliver. That delivery silenced the noise. It showed that strength doesn't come from hiding flaws, but from rising above them. The horrified stares came because you showed something most never can: the ability to grow stronger after being stripped of illusions. That kind of resilience becomes a weapon of its own, sharper than any secret could ever be. Love, friendship, work, life, it all comes back to the same truth. They weren't horrified by what they knew about you. They were horrified by what you became because of it. The secret was supposed to break you. Instead, it refined you. They looked for weakness and found willpower. They looked for shame and found composure. They looked for collapse and found confidence. Their fear wasn't about revelation. It was about transformation. You didn't just survive. You turned their weapon into your shield. And nothing terrifies manipulators more than the moment they realize they armed you by accident.